I am C.G. Cooper. This is Core Justice, first book in the Core Justice series, chapter 29, Tilly. Maybe I should start over. Cal remembered first meeting the man years ago. Leonard Tilly had left the Marine Corps after serving in Vietnam. He'd been a machine gunner and then Captain Stokes' company. Back in those days, the military wasn't given the same place of honor as in the post 9/11 days. The proud Marine returned home to find protesters spitting at him and calling him names. Worst of all, upon returning to his family, he found that his twin sister, the two had been inseparable from birth, now dressed in hippie garb and spewing the same propaganda he'd heard debarking the airplane ride home. That's a funny sentence. I don't know who this author is. Just kidding. Even after repeated attempts to make peace with his sister, he finally gave up. Unable to settle in or even find a job, he learned to cope through drugs and alcohol. Instead of dealing with the pain and emotional grief, he internalized his pain and went into a quick downward spiral. Within a year, the poor man was living on the streets, begging for money so he could buy a hit or swig. Leonard Tilly spent the rest of the 1970s and 1980s bouncing from shelter to shelter and bottle to bottle. In the mid-90s, Tilly had somehow wandered to the Nashville area. By that time, the Stokes family was back in Nashville, and Cal Sr. was reestablishing his roots and expanding his business. One weekend, as father and son were volunteering at a local shelter handing out food, Cal Sr. spied Tilly in a line. Now hunched, his body ravaged and aged by years of abuse, the prematurely old man shuffled forward in his oversized winter coat. On his left arm, he'd sewn on a tattered Marine Corps emblem. Cal Sr. liked to chat with the people they volunteered to help and use the patch as his introduction. "Nice patch you got there. Were you in the Corps?" The crusty Marine looked back at him suspiciously. "Yeah? So what?" "I was in the Marine Corps too." Tilly paused and tried to concentrate, his gaze on his fellow Marine. Without thinking, he blurted, "I was in Vietnam." "Me too." Those were different times, weren't they? Finally, the man's smile cracked. Cal Sr. could see his filthy teeth, but also noticed the sudden gleam of remembrance in the man's eyes. They sure were. Different times. Over subsequent visits, Cal Sr. made it a point to keep track of Tilly and check up on him. Cal remembered asking his father why. "Because he will always be a Marine," his father said. "That makes us family. If he wants help, I'll give it to him." The two Marines had quickly made the miraculous discovery that the homeless Tilly had once served under Cal Sr.'s command. Not surprisingly, Cal's father put great effort into helping his Marine. Over time, Tilly agreed to enter a rehabilitation program paid for by the charitable arm of Stokes Security International. After getting cleaned up and reunited with his family, he was offered a position in the newly built SSI complex just south of Nashville. After years of substance abuse, Tilly's mental capacity was now diminished. He was, however, extremely grateful for the chance to help maintain the grounds for SSI. Over the next few years, he became one of the company's most loyal employees, refusing, even after numerous offers from Cal's father, to call Cal Sr. anything but Colonel. Tilly was once again home among his fellow warriors. He ate in the chow hall and shopped in the small PX. This was indeed his home. Upon Cal Sr.'s death, Leonard Tilly wept openly as he demanded from Travis that he be allowed to maintain the colonel's office as a sort of shrine. Travis had relented. After officially retiring, Tilly was given a comfortable living space in one of the campus's small homes. So, I'm not sure where that character came from. This happens to me sometimes as I'm writing, I don't know, somebody will just jump out at me and kind of demand to be on page, and that's what Leonard Tilly did to me. I think part of it was just that nod to Vietnam veterans who came back and just weren't treated the way they should have been treated. And I know some of you listening to this were in that family that came home that was not taken care of. And hopefully since then, we've done a better job at honoring your service and you being part of our family, because you always will be. And that's a beautiful thing about the Marine Corps. And this was definitely sort of, uh, an homage to my grandfather, who spent a lot of time in the Marine Corps, that he talked about taking care of his Marines all the time. And that is deep inside of me and deep inside the rest of my family. So I think when I initially wrote this, that's what this chapter was about. It was a little bit about the character, but it was more of a nod to, Vietnam veterans and the way that we are supposed to take care of Marines, which is super important. So anyway, enough about that. Let's move on to the next chapter.